So, welcome to Northern Powerhouses, where we discuss with local business leaders their backgrounds, their successes, their challenges, and what's really driving them forwards. And this morning, I'm delighted to have with us Brett Lofthouse, who's founder at Stanley Cowton International. So, firstly, Brett, thank you for spending a bit of time with us. And if you'd like to introduce yourself, your business, what you do, how you help people, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, no problem. So thank you very much, Chris, for having us on the podcast.
Very welcome.
I'm Brett Lofthouse, founder at SCI, Stanley Cowton International, which is a international search firm. So we are a business working across Europe and North America. And we specialize really within the GMP and chemical industries. So GMP is like, your life sciences, food and beverage, cosmetics, etc.
Yep.
Life sciences, sorry, I said that. Chemicals, flavors, fragrance, and ingredients, basically. So
Yes.
Stanley Cowton was my grandfather. That's it. That was my grandfather's name. So the business, means very much to myself and my family that it carries his name. It's a family-run business. My brother joined myself and my wife, who founded the business, and then my son, and then an ex-colleague, and then a family friend has recently joined. So we are working across the value chain, so R&D, clinical, medical, all the way through to commercial, and we work from senior niche individual contributor to the C-level. Now, really where we niche down is that we're only working with companies on their most strategic hiring. So whatever, is strategic for businesses, and that's different for every businesses, we are able to go in and support them with those hires, which are usually complex, critical or confidential searches.
Yep. Wonderful. Wonderful. And what would you say makes a great client for you specifically? What sort of client, whether it's a type of client, and which ones do you work best with, would you say?
For us, it's all about partnership.
Right.
It's we're not here to be a recruiting search firm that are working with a client on one search and then we walk away and find the next client. It's about working with organizations. Our North Star here is over delivery for candidates and clients. We're a people first business, and that's really what kind of shaped the business. So
right.
We would rather work with one company 100 times than 100 companies once.
Great.
So that's the ideal partner, somebody that we can get close to, really kind of be an extension of their talent acquisition team.
Brilliant. And I don't think it'd be doing it justice if I didn't ask a little bit more about your grandfather. I'm doing a bit of research before we started. There's a lovely piece on a page on your website about him. So, and I have to say, it made me think about mine. I learned a lot from my own grandfather. What was it about him that's been so important for you?
Yeah, I think he's kind of like old-fashioned values have really kind of stayed with myself and my brother. He was somebody who was honest, integrity really, and our kind of tagline is that we're built on integrity, and that all those kind of values come from my granddad. Who was a huge part of mine and my brother's life, and a huge part of kind of shaping us into who we are today.
Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. So if we do look backwards to start with, Brett, if you could tell us a little bit more about your background, how you got into business, and why this particular one for you.
Yeah. So my background was not within recruitment. So actually, I started in construction when I left school. I put myself through evening college to get my qualifications within carpentry. I enjoyed that. But the 2008 financial crash hit. All the kind of building sites were closing down, and
Yes.
I had to pivot and think,
Yeah.
right, okay, what else can I do?
Yeah.
I had friends that worked in sales. I thought actually that's something I think I could do. And actually looked into recruitment, and really thought actually that I've got some good skills that could go into that industry. So not a lot of people look to get into recruitment. I'm one of the odd individuals. Most people fall into it. I
Yes.
looked for it.
Yep.
So I did telesales for a few months to get some experience in sales. Then I got my first recruitment role in 2009. Built my career from 2009 onwards. Up until my last organization, I joined there in 2018. But by 2023, myself and my wife were about to turn 40. We kind of wanted to pause, see what was next for us. I was a little bit disillusioned with the recruitment industry at that point. So we took a career break.
Yep.
And we quit my job. We rented out a house. We went and lived and worked on a farm, and we just wanted to see, like, what do we want to do with the next part of our lives? And I would advise anybody who can to do that, because
Yep.
I actually didn't think I'd even get back into recruitment, but really, I really missed it. I really missed the fast pace and the buzz. But myself and my wife thought, well, actually, we think we can do it better. So we designed our business in areas that we feel recruitment generally falls down in. So recruitment is not known for its customer service. So we've made sure that we're a people first business.
Brilliant.
And that's for candidates and clients. It's really
Yep.
important to us, and as a part of our values. That our North Star is that over delivery for candidates and clients. And that's really helped us to get to where we are today. And also, I think in that true partnership model, we thought, okay, how can we rebalance the scales between a recruiter and a client? So we guarantee any candidate that we place for 12 months, which is fairly unheard of in the industry. But it really shows that partnership model that we have.
Oh, brilliant. And yeah, I mean, it clearly, as I say, look at your website, it's clear that you've taken those values, those important values you've gotten, and it's embedded in everything you do. So just going back even further than your background, as a young child, is this, as you're growing up, is this what you foresaw for yourself as a future, or did you have other plans at that point?
Yeah, absolutely not, is the answer. So I'm from a very kind of working class background, and the background that I am from, if you left school and you were in work and you worked hard and you stayed in work, then everybody was quite happy with you. It was there wasn't great expectations on where you had to take your career at all, as long as you
Yep.
were working. So yeah, I never really thought that this would be my type of work, actually. Growing up, I would say that I was kind of I was quite hands-on, an engineering type of mind. So I'd
Yep.
literally take anything apart that I could find and try and put it back together.
Brilliant.
So my parents or grandparents would often find things kind of half when I'm trying to put it back together, couldn't always quite manage. I'd be down in our cellar with any tools I could get my hands on, the materials, and just trying to make things. And I think that's why when I left school, I went into carpentry.
Makes perfect sense. So looking back over the growth of the business, what are some of the biggest challenges and issues you've had to overcome?
I think really, it's not. I would say it's not challenges within the business to overcome. I mean, obviously, there's challenges all the time within a business, and one of the things I guess when you start a business is that you have to learn so much. You have to become a VAT expert. You have to become kind of an accountant.
Yep.
You have to be a website developer. But for me, it wasn't. It's not being the business as such. It's like throughout life, I think the challenge is really for me has been mindset, and that's what I've done a lot of work on. I think I mentioned that the background that I've come from, very working class background, very working class northern background, and I think sometimes that can come with not quite a negative mindset. Sometimes it's it's not always a positive mindset.
Yes.
And I think as northerners, our sense of humor can be quite dark and quite negative sometimes. But I think for me, overcoming that mindset, having like limiting beliefs, not really truly believing in myself, I think they're the issues that I've had to overcome. So throughout my career, obviously I've had lots of different learnings and read lots of different books. I was also quite a late bloomer, I would say, in terms of being career focused. I was
Yep.
probably in my early to mid 30s before I really started truly focusing on my career. And in 2020, I gave up alcohol for good.
Well done.
And I think that was a catalyst for me to really focus and push on. And I think if I hadn't have done that, I wouldn't be here
Wow.
today talking to you.
Wow, well done.
Thank
That's
you.
absolutely fascinating. It's a really interesting mindset. I work with lots of people at different stages in their business careers, and one thing that is really is quite common is trying to move away from what I do call an employee mindset. I mean, traditional
Mhm.
employment is, you work from 18 or whatever, or 20 or whatever, to retirement age, and hopefully make enough money then to stop doing something that you didn't really enjoy, and
Yeah,
hopefully have some time left to spend what pension you have. And all those
yeah,
constructs don't directly apply to a business owner, and that's the
yeah.
freedom that business ownership gives you. Um,
Mhm.
and I often meet people saying, "Well, when you're going to finish your business?" And it's so, "Well, I've got another 20 years till I'm 60." And I'm going, "Well, that's what an employee that you don't need. Business doesn't have to wait till you get to 60 to finish. It can be finished in 2 or 3 years." And so,
Yeah.
but I think the other thing that I find a lot, Brett, is most people is the challenge we have is in any form, whether it's employment or business, is
Mhm.
we're told sensibly by our parents, by our family, that if you work hard, then you'll be successful. And that's very true. But from a business perspective, there comes a point where to grow the business past the point of when it's about us is we have to start thinking about working with and through other people, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
And not approaching the challenge we often have is, okay, we've got to do something. What do I do? Whereas as
Yeah.
a business owner and leader, we need to start thinking about who can I work through to get it done. Otherwise, we start to be the limiting factor of the business itself, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, so, what would you say, whether it's from challenges or other areas, what would you say your biggest learnings are about growing a business?
The biggest learnings about growing a business. That's a tricky one, actually. I'm not sure the biggest learnings. I think um, I think being adaptable
Yep,
is one thing.
yep,
You might have one idea, but actually, I think you've got to learn quite quickly
yes,
to
yes,
understand if that idea is good or not. Because not as a business owner and kind of I think having that entrepreneurial mindset, which most business owners do have, we do have lots of ideas.
yep,
And the bit I enjoy about being a business owner is that if you have an idea, you can run with it very quickly. But also, I think what you've got to do is to understand actually maybe this idea is not the best, and being able to pivot quickly and
yep,
get more data and more information that allows you to have a better idea. And I think that's another learning as well within business is that to try and be as data driven as possible because
yep,
I think we can spend a lot of time chasing things, doing things that are not actually, if you look at the data
yep,
behind them, maybe not, maybe it's a client that you're chasing, but actually you look at the data and that client's actually not hiring. They're in the opposite spiral where they're actually, consolidating. So,
yep.
look at the data, make sure you're spending your time wisely.
Yeah. No, it makes absolute sense. It's funny we talked about adaptability. We'll talk a little bit about quotes later on, but one of my favourite quotes, which was very relevant during COVID and lockdown, was came from Charles Darwin and the
Mhm.
origin of species, which was, I may not get this completely right, but he said it's not the strongest or the most intelligent of the species that survive, but the ones that are most adaptable to change. and
Yeah.
and I think it was so relevant during very relevant during COVID lockdown, but it's relevant all the time.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And we're in a fast changing world. And I
Yep,
think being adaptable I'd say that one of the biggest learnings about being a business owner is the learnings. Like,
Yeah,
you're always got to push yourself out of your comfort zone,
yep,
do things that are new, and learn new things. Like, look into things all the time. If I continued today to just do in recruitment what I've learned over the last 15 years, within 5 years or less, I could be out of business. I think
yep.
it's continually getting new information and learning and growing and developing.
Brilliant, brilliant. And I think you're aware we're a business coaching organisation. I'm keen to know who the best coaches you've worked with, whether that's business, sport, life in general. Who's had the biggest
Yeah.
impact on you? And I'm guessing there might be a nod to somebody we've already talked about, but who has had the biggest impact on you?
Yeah, look, I think my granddad, as I say, kind of shaped me as an individual who I am. I think from a business sense, probably not so much. My granddad was a very honest and hardworking person, and I really admire that. I think from a business sense, I've kind of learned along the way. I've talked about how I stopped drinking in around about 2020, and my career moved on from there. I would say that when I went into recruitment initially, my kind of thoughts were definitely more work to live type mentality.
Yes.
And I would say that I didn't have the work ethic that I have now. And I think one of the biggest learnings for me was that work ethic piece.
Yeah.
And I've got a couple of people to thank for that. So Daniel Nash and James Galloway, who were two of my bosses at a previous company called IC Resources.
Yeah.
Those guys were great. I learned the brilliant basics of recruitment there. But me personally, I wasn't anywhere near the finished article. I don't think my work ethic was fantastic when I joined. And actually, one year I had a yearly review with Dan and James, and they tore into me a little bit, and it hurt. It really hurt. And actually, at that point, many people might have said, actually, I'm going to look for a new job. I can't be here. For me, it was definitely a catalyst for change, and I looked at that as more of I'm going to prove these guys wrong. Not prove them wrong because they were right. So it was about changing myself. I think at that point I used to blame. I'd be blaming kind of external forces, never
Yep.
looking internally and thinking, actually, what could I be doing better? How could
Yep.
I, improve this situation? And with the guidance of those individuals and other people within that organization, I think I really found my work ethic, and that's where my drive for really building a career started.
Brilliant, brilliant. And do you have any favourite quotes or sayings of around successful business in general that you catch yourself using on a regular basis?
So there's a couple of things that I have, and I'll give you two. So one of them is mine, and
Brilliant.
it's just about life in general. And one of them is from a book that I'm reading recently, which is Arnold Schwarzenegger. So he's I don't know if you've read his book. But one of the books that I have is around. It's like the lessons. I don't know if it's like the 7 lessons in life or something like that. But
Yes.
the one thing that kind of I really thought was really simple was saying that his dad taught him, which is be useful.
Yep.
And I think that's so simple. And the kind of the idea behind this is, make a positive impact. So don't just exist, but contribute to others, contribute to your community, contribute to your industry, which is one thing that I'm really trying to do with this business, to make sure that we kind of contribute to the community,
Yep.
and that we give back. So we're building communities where people first, we always want to help people. And, one thing that we've just started doing is supporting a local UK children's cancer charity.
Brilliant.
That for me is very important, that as we continue to succeed in this business, we, kind of use that to do good as well. So the other one is within that be useful is like take responsibility. So don't wait around and or complain. Find ways to add value where you can. And for me, that adding value piece, whether it's with, candidates, with clients, whatever that is, and whether that's free value, not just something that has a price tag on it, but free value, I think, is important, because I really believe what goes around comes around.
Yep.
And then living with purpose. So using your skills, your time, your energy to do something meaningful and not just self-serving. And I think, again, giving people value for free, having this charity that we're now supporting all comes into
Brilliant.
that. And my own kind of saying is, if you don't like something, change it.
Great.
And I think, in life, in business, that's always, I think life's too short, like, to be miserable. If you don't like something, do something about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I was, in my previous role, I was kind of in the highest level role I'd ever had. I was earning kind of the most money I'd ever earned, and I wasn't happy. And I quit my job, and people were like, "What are you doing? This is madness." But for me, it made complete sense.
No, it really does to me too. It's like it's as you say, life is too short to spend time doing things we don't really
Mhm.
enjoy. And one thing I always say to people in business, which again is a gift of having your own business, is as the downside of having your own business is ultimately the buck stops with us.
Yeah,
Until maybe we get somebody else for whom the buck stops eventually, hopefully. But the great thing about having your own business is you get to choose exactly how it is, who you work
yeah,
with, how you work, when you work, where you work,
mhm,
all those things,
yeah,
and that's a gift that so many people don't have, and so
yeah.
it's really key. And you obviously mentioned Arnold's book already, but do you have any other favorite books or podcasts that you can recommend?
Yeah, I'm not hugely into podcasts. If I'm honest,
Yep.
I've listened to a few. There's definitely, sometimes if I'm on a long drive, I'll just put a few
Yeah.
different podcasts on, and I think they're quite useful. But I kind of go in and out of those. For me, it's the reading piece.
Yep.
So one thing that when I think a lot goes back to this, when I stopped drinking in 2020, I started reading for the first time really in my life.
Right. Brilliant.
And now I've got a book, a bookcase full of books that my wife tells me I need to get rid of, but I've got some obsession with keeping them, even if I've read them. So there's a few books over time, and I think, like, with the self-help books, like, you don't get a book and kind of live by that book, but I think you generally take
Yes.
away one or two
Cool.
things
Agreed.
um, that stick with you and tend to change you a little bit. So I'm just trying to think of the books that have had the most impact on me, and I've forgotten the name of it now. It's a Navy SEAL, David Goggins.
David Goggins. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, he's got two books, and I
Yeah.
think they were brilliant in really kind of making you realize that, there's always more to give. You're only ever working at about 40% capacity.
Yep.
You can push yourself a lot further. I read Jay Shetty's Think Like a Monk. That was very good. Again, there's just little bits and pieces
Yeah.
in there which you learn about, like, ego, and you think, okay, actually, when I'm doing something, is this my ego? Am I being a bit ego driven here?
Yeah.
So it's helping you understand how you present yourself. There's Surrounded by Idiots, which was all about the disc profiling.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's lots of them, and you just take a bit from each one.
Yeah.
Anne is one at the moment, I have to say, I love, and they're never a quick read. They're always, like, the self-help books take me a bit longer because I have to read them,
Yes.
digest them,
Yes.
and quite often make notes and go away and think about them. But yeah, I think they're very helpful.
Brilliant. Brilliant. And on the learning front, what would you say you've learned about yourself throughout your journey so far?
What have I learned about myself? That's it's a tricky one. I guess, in terms of learning about myself, I guess that I've learned that I love business, really. I think that's a kind of, I thought it was just recruitment, that I loved, but actually no, I love running a business. I think, it really just goes well with my personality. Um, I I like to, have ideas, do things quickly. So, the kind of running a business part for me is it's really exciting.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, and I think I've also learned that I do enjoy work, and that I really enjoy work. In fact, I always thought before that life was too short to all be about work, and it is in a sense. But you've got to have a lot of kind of passion about what you do.
Yes.
You've got to enjoy going to work every day. And I think when I had that time out and I lived on a farm and it was all too slow pace, I had to, the next thing I had to do had to have meaning. And this does
Yep.
have meaning to me. I think you've got to find meaning in what you do, whether that's just delivering for a client or whatever that meaning is. I think you've got to find that, and I've learned about myself, about kind of finding that meaning, and that purpose is key.
Brilliant.
And also, I've really learned that you've got to enjoy who you work with, and that's why we're working with family and friends and ex-colleagues.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, again, it goes back to that idea. That idea. I think that you can create it exactly how you want it. That's the beauty of having your own business, who you work with, how you work, etc., etc. Brilliant.
Yeah,
And there is a great. I don't know if you may have read this already, but there's a great book just about thinking about meaning. Is man's search for meaning, which is Viktor Frankl, which is fascinating. Getting into the depths of how we think and how we act. It might well fit with some of the things you've talked about already.
okay.
I can strongly recommend. Yeah, it's talking about mindset of people. Unfortunately, in the concentration camps, it
Mhm.
references people and how
Yeah,
they still manage to live lives and have a level of normality in something in such a horrific situation. But
yeah,
yeah, it's a fascinating read if you're interested. I mean,
yeah. I'll take a look at that.
yeah, please do. Yeah, yeah, it might be helpful. And speaking about business in general, so we have a definition of a true business and action coach, and that's a
Mhm.
commercial, profitable enterprise that works without its owners.
Yeah.
Now that can may or may not be a challenge to some people. What are your thoughts on that?
Um, the business being able to work without its owners.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, look, I think it's a tricky one, and I would say that I'm kind of in that position at the moment. Or I've, when the business started, I was the chief of everything officer.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. I couldn't go on holiday. I was having to work because everything relied on me.
Yep.
So that was kind of like our year one. We're just coming to the end of our year two now. But when we did our year two kickoff at the start of October last year. One of the missions there was, Brett isn't the chief of everything officer. That has to change.
Brilliant.
So as we've grown the business and got more kind of capability and more experience within the business, that's definitely changed now. And
Brilliant.
Laura, one of my colleagues who joined most recently, she's got a brilliant kind of 20 plus year career history within search and recruitment, and she is so talented. And she stands for recruitment excellence. So I've been able to kind of hand, a good portion of work to Laura to be
Great.
able to own. Basically, she's kind of owning that piece in the business. So as we continue to grow, you can kind of start to outsource a lot more.
Yep.
So I've been doing all the marketing. 2 weeks ago we hired a marketing manager. They're the
Brilliant.
experts. They can do that full time.
Yep.
And the plan again this year, as we do the year three kickoff, is more and more about how do I make myself a bit more obsolete within the business,
Great.
rather than things having to depend on me. So
Yep.
I agree. I think going from going towards what I call a proper business is a business where it doesn't necessarily depend on you. But I would also say that can take a long time to get to that point as
Yep.
well. I certainly don't see any time soon where the business doesn't have some level of dependency on me. But you just have to keep analyzing
Yeah.
and working towards getting to that point, I think.
I think it's one of these things where it often it is what people plan to do when they start a business is this time next year,
Mm.
that's and can get stuck on the hamster wheel. But I think it is that I think the interesting thing I find, Brett, is that without that plan over time, we tend to become the bottleneck in our business because while
Hmm.
it is dependent on us, we will typically hold it back. And so
Yeah.
it's a mindset shift rather than necessarily as of tomorrow I'm not in the business anymore. It's but how do I make sure that if I wasn't here, the business can still be successful and grow, not just survive, if that makes sense. So you mentioned the future. What does the future look like for you guys, and what challenges do you think you might face, if any?
So I think the future for us, I think we do see a lot more growth within the business, and I think it's kind of for us to decide what that growth looks like really. My ambition is never to have a huge recruiting business. So for me, I think if we could get to kind of 10 to 15 people, that would be, and we're at 6 now. So that
Brilliant.
for me would be, it's all about continuing to be enjoyable,
Yep.
knowing people by name, knowing things about their lives, their families, that kind of what you get in a small business. And I think
Yep.
once you start to scale too much, it becomes a different beast. And I don't know if that's something that I really want as a business owner. So we'll continue to grow carefully. I think challenges going forward for me, one of the biggest challenges that we all face is AI.
Yep.
I think it's one of it's going to be, one of the biggest changes to mankind, I believe.
Yes.
Um, so, as we move forward, it's about kind of leaning into AI to become more efficient and more lean, and making sure that we understand it properly. I think what as a recruiting business, one of our strong points is that we are a people first business, and I think that's going to become even more key as everybody starts to use AI
Yep.
and automation so much more. People are going to crave the actual human interaction. I mean, already I'm getting emails, I'm getting people comment on LinkedIn, and you can clearly tell they're AI generated,
Yes.
and that's just going to become more and more of a thing. So I think use AI correctly to make you more efficient, to cut
Yep.
down on the tasks that are mundane and boring, automate things that can be automated, but then allow that time that's freed up for you to interact with people.
Yep. Completely agree. Completely agree. It's that human interaction that
Mhm.
I was going to say AI can't do. I do accept at some point in the future, whether it's 1 year, 10 years, 100 years, it will be able to do things as well as in that level. But for now, I think human interaction
Mhm.
is key. We had a guy called Gary Vaynerchuk speak at one of our events. About 6 months ago, so if you do know him, he's got 50 million followers on social media. He's a massive social
Okay.
media marketeer, and he said, eventually a job will be to go for a walk with somebody because AI
Yeah.
will be doing everything else, but that human interaction you still can't. But fascinating. No, completely agree. It's using the benefits of it while we're. I do think it makes me think. Actually, I've been communicating with a few people about it. Is I think what it'll need to learn is not to be quite so nice. If that makes sense, you can tell it's AI. Cause, oh yeah, how can I? Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, everything's great. And it reminds me a little bit of the film The Matrix, where they said when the original Matrix they made was absolutely perfect, and everyone had the perfect life,
Mhm.
living on a beach or wherever they wanted to live, and humans rejected it because it was too perfect. And I think that's
Yeah.
that's something you might need to learn to get a bit grumpy every now and again. But
Yeah.
Brett, I'm keen to know. It's been great talking about this, and so I'm keen to know your particular view on what would you say to anyone that was thinking of going to business right now?
So I think if somebody is looking to start their own business, I think first of all, make sure you're doing it for the right reasons.
Yeah,
Make sure that you're kind of passionate about what you are doing, and don't think it's going to be an easy ride. I think a lot of people go into it thinking, let's take recruitment for an example. They say, okay, well, look, I'm earning £500,000 a year for my company, but I'm only seeing 150,000 of that, for an example.
yeah,
If I did this for myself, I could then just earn 150,000 and work a third of the time that I work
yeah,
now. That's not reality. Working for somebody else, they're taking care of lots of other
Yeah,
departments, leaving you just to do your job in your own business.
absolutely.
You've got to do everything. And so if you think it's going to be easy, don't do it. I would say that I probably work in the longest hours I've ever worked now, and will continue to do so. Don't get me wrong, you get the flexibility of when you do those 12, 14 hours a day, you can split that differently where other people
Yes.
can't, but you're
Yep.
doing those hours if you
Yep.
want to be successful. So I think that's key to understand. And also, you'd never, work is always on your mind. So, when you're not working, you're thinking about work. When you're sleeping, you're dreaming about work. And this is actually true. This is what happens with me anyway. Maybe I'm too much, but it's definitely the case. But yeah, you've got to be all in, I think.
Yeah,
That would be my advice. You can't half do these things.
brilliant. And if you started your business again, is there anything significant you do differently, do you think?
Absolutely not. No,
Cool.
no. I'm not somebody who kind of lives with coulda, woulda, shoulda. I don't kind of try not to really have regrets. I think that things that you go through, tough times in life, that's what really shapes you. And actually, when you look back, you think, oh, do you know what, that actually really did change me for the better. That changed the course of my life. At the time, it feels terrible,
Yeah.
but afterwards you appreciate it, how that did shape you. So I
Yes.
don't live with regrets. I think there's things we've got right in the business, there's things we've got wrong, but it's all been good
Yep.
learning.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. A great viewpoint. And finally, Brett, what would be the best advice you could give an 18-year-old you if you could go back in time and do that?
Yeah. So look, I think there's a few things. I think if I were to give myself advice, it would be useful.
Yep.
As you can tell, that's one of my favorite kind of
Yes.
phrases at the moment. But I think you know to have that advice would be fantastic. I would certainly tell myself to party less, because I did party a lot in my younger days, and didn't focus as much as maybe I should have done. I think reading some of the books that I've read, and having a kind of change of mindset a little bit. Just actually, if you really want to achieve something, I think you can. Um, you know, Not saying everybody can go play for Real Madrid, but actually, if you really put your mind to something, then you can do it. But I just don't think a lot of people understand the hard work then behind that. If you
Yes.
really want to achieve something difficult, it really just has to become your life.
Yes.
Um, I think positive. I think positivity. I know some people hate that kind of positivity. Everything's positive, and I'm not saying it is, but I think you've got to think like that. Really, you've got to look at the positives, think more positive, and shield yourself as much as possible from negativity.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. In fact, I know you mentioned Arnie's book. I've not read his book, but there is a famous speech he made of about his seven sort of tenets of success. And one
Mhm.
is, and I won't try and do the voice, but it's ignore the naysayers.
Yes.
And just ignore them, because if you believe, if and the interesting thing about naysayers is they're telling you what they can't do, not what you can't do. If that makes
Yeah.
sense. The
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've not finished his book yet. I'm still reading it. I'm on holiday next week, so I'll probably take it with me then and finish it. But I completely agree. When I started this business in 2023, the kind of post-pandemic bubble had just burst. So companies were having a really good time in the pandemic. Record revenues for so
Yep.
many businesses. And then they thought it was going to carry on like that. So and it didn't. It burst. And the amount of people that were saying to me, "Oh, I really wouldn't want to be you right now, starting a business," and just there's kind of this negativity and the naysayers, and you just have to block them out. And you're right. Anybody who's done something pioneering in life, they will all have been told it can't be done. That's
Oh,
crazy. What are
100%.
you doing?
I I think my most successful client I'm currently working with at the moment, who is now she's employing. I think she's employing 350 people. Got 8 businesses. She
Wow.
started her business mainly because someone told her she wouldn't be able to. Yeah, oh, you'll never make that
Yeah,
work. And that was the
yeah,
driver, which was interesting. Was absolutely one of the key drivers. There's so much more within her that makes her so successful, but that she would say that was certainly the trigger for
yeah,
wanting to do this. So it's interesting. So a couple of my two favorite quotes that I use that I use all the time, which I think are a big part of what we've discussed so far. One is it's not so much relevant, but it's a Japanese proverb that says fall down 7 times but get up 8,
yeah.
which I love. I think I'm on 13 or 14 at least at the moment. But the other one, which is very relevant to what you've said, is Henry Ford's famous quote of whether we think we can or think we can't, we're right.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? It doesn't matter what other people say, and
Mhm.
it's what we believe in our own heart that we can achieve, and if we believe it, then we can do it.
Yeah, I really like that one, and I believe it's true. I think that you know, kind of, I don't know, 95% or all of it, it's all mindset. It's all what you believe.
Really is.
Yeah, yeah. If
It
you believe, like you say, if you believe you can't do something, you're not going to be able to do it. Simple as that.
100%, Brett. It's really interesting, actually. I think people, looking back over time of people that I've worked with and my organisations worked with, I think most people value the fact that we've got a wealth of systems and processes. When we first meet, it's that we've got a structure to build a business. We've got system, for anything that you need, and I think that's what people feel they're buying at that point, and sensibly so. But I would
Mhm.
suggest more than 50% of the value that people received of working with us over time is the mindset change.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's the mindset of believing that we can, and that's for me is the coaching part in many ways. It's the
Mhm.
mindset, it's coaching the person to achieve the things that they can achieve. Brett, it's been absolutely fascinating talking to you this morning. Thank you so much for your time. And for anyone that's interested in getting in touch with you or an SCI, what would be the best way of doing that?
So, I mean, head over to LinkedIn and check out Stanley Cowton International or myself on there. Visit our website, and all of our contact details are on there as well. So, yeah, reach out, and we'll be more than happy to help in any way we can.
Brilliant. Well, look, it'd be great to swim by another 6 to 12 months and just see what the next stages and of the story are. But for now, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Chris. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.